Approach Control, this is Podcast 1.
Go ahead, Podcast 1. This is Approach Control.
Tower, this is Free Range Texan Airways. We've turned on final approach and are beginning our descent.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten your seatbelt sign and has informed me that we will be landing on schedule for our bi-weekly Free Range Texan podcast. Please remain seated until Podcast 1 rolls to a complete stop. On behalf of our captain and crew, we thank you for flying Free Range Texan Airways.
7.
Start the clock.
6.
Stand by, Eddie Bay 1.
5.
Stand by, Sweetie Pie.
4.
Bring studio mics hot.
3.
Stand by, Michael Shawn.
2.
Roll music.
1.
Well, howdy, y'all. The Free Range Texan podcast is underway. This here program is a special look at the way life is shaping up for folks in the U.S. of A., seen through the eyes of a born and bred West Texan. Our host is a veteran broadcaster who is known for his campfire visits on radio. Michael Shawn is standing by.
Outstanding in my field out yonder.
So here he is, our host, a real free-range Texan himself, Michael Shawn.
And once again, here with my constant companion, Foxy the Wonder Dog. She said something about being hungry. Man, oh man, oh man, oh man, what a show we got for you. I've been doing a little break dancing around the studio here today. That, ladies and gentlemen, is busting a move. Just look at this lineup. Daniel Jones, our cryptozoology expert, is back because we called him and caught him out on the road investigating really strange stuff. And we asked Daniel to bring us up to date on the actual public events that are going to be taking place over the next few months around our area of the country. And we want you to be able to attend if you would like. So Daniel's going to bring us up to date on all of that. As usual, he knows stuff. And then, of course, you will need to cover the ears of the younger ones in our audience. But before we get to Daniel Jones, we're going to have a story about a dog fight. 2 dogs fighting, as a matter of fact. I'm telling you, folks, this is an action-packed adventure, and we're going to bring it to this edition of the Free Range Texan podcast. But it's exciting, so you're going to need to strap in for that. And as always, we do what we like to do. We'll end up at the campfire. So let's get ready to ride.
Have digital microphone, will travel. Dress code required.
Best if combined with smoked meats. Yeah, like no caps with bills on the back. Yeah, where do you find those anyway? Officially designated as a spectacular use of your time consuming addictive audio.
You're listening to the Free Range Texan podcast.
Hello, I'm Michael Shawn. I'd like to read you a story written by Deloy Edwards. He wrote it about his dad. It was April 1935 that the great battle between the badger and the bulldog took place. A very memorable occasion in Cary Valley. The participants were Trap Edwards, Mr. Carlson, Ian Edmondson, Mr. Parks, and the trained badger, and of course a bulldog. Trap, my dad, could be gone for up to 60 days or more at a time, trapping coyotes, bobcats, and badgers. It was during one of these trips that Dad had trapped and trained a badger to fight dogs. or so it was rumored. The local persons heretofore mentioned suggested that a fight between the badger and the bulldog be arranged. The word of this proposed fight spread rapidly throughout the county and all the surrounding area. The date was set for April 1st. The place, the gymnasium of Cary High School. The night of the fight, the gym was full to the rafters, including representatives of the SPCA, the county sheriff, complete with arrest warrants, and men and women and kids from as far away as Shoshone or Rupert. Mr. Carlson announced that the badger was trained to leave by the back door after the fight. The crowd parted like the Red Sea for Moses, leaving an open lane to the back door. Then, Mr. Parks came on stage leading a St. Bernard. He stated that the bulldog had suddenly died and the badger would have to fight the St. Bernard. He suggested that the crowd closest to the stage stand on their chairs in case the badger turned on them. The crowd readily complied. Tension grew. Everyone in the gym was nervous. Trapp asked Ian Edmondson to assist him in getting the badger and the dog to the center of the stage where the fight would take place. At that moment, the representative of the SPCA jumped up and addressed the crowd, as well as my dad. He stated that if the fight was to continue from this point on, he would have to arrest the whole group. The crowd jeered and yelled for the battle to proceed, regardless of the consequences. Carlson, standing with a rope in his hand, started to pull the badger out. As he did, the rope seemingly was tied to a chamber pot filled with tea and donuts. The St. Bernard left the stage on a dead run. The crowd became completely shocked. The SPCA representative and the sheriff ducked their heads and ran out the back door, humiliated, very humiliated. Then suddenly the crowd realized that the entire event was happening on April 1st and began laughing until they cried. And one more thing. Mother never forgave Dad for not letting her know.
The Free Range Talent File is looking to see if you're looking to be on the Free Range Texan podcast. Calling all talent, all kinds of music, country and western.
That never gets old.
Folk music, rock and roll, cowboy poetry, or maybe you just tell a good story. Talent is talent. Maybe your talent will make the cut on the Free Range Talent File.
If you've got talent, or if someone you know has talent, submit their name and telephone number to info@freerangetexan.net. They'll probably get a call to talk about podcast stuff, and you could be our next guest on the Free Range Texan Talent File. Go ahead, send it in. 18PR Studios has plenty of tour bus parking. It's a telephone interview, and we'll probably end up playing one of your recordings. You can do this. Okay, turn the effects back on.
Email submissions to info@freerangetexan.net. Your friends, relatives, girlfriends, family, boyfriends, or all of the above could be listening to you as our next guest on the Free Range Talent File, providing a home for talent. The Free Range Texan Podcast.
And now, once again, it's time for another free-range Texan unexplained file.
First of all, I'd like to point out that if you don't have a cryptozoology investigator in your life, you should get one. Here at the Free Range Texan, we have Daniel Jones. He is, among other things, a cryptozoology investigator. Asking him questions is always a lot of fun. Daniel.
Hey, Michael, great. Thanks for that introduction and doing well.
Always good to have you on the podcast, Daniel. There are a lot of people that have responded to the fact that we've got pictures of you up on the blog, and apparently, I get tickled at some of the responses we get. Apparently, you're a real person. And for those folks who have not seen Daniel Jones, you can go to freerangetexan.net and then punch the blog up there on that website. A lot of people hear the things that we talk about on the unexplained files, Daniel, and they want to maybe get involved, or they'll say, I don't know if that's true. How can I find out more? And we try to point them to this event or that event. But you were telling me that there's some interesting things coming up in our area of the United States. You want to tell us about that?
Sure thing, and I think it's really great for people to look into different ways to be more involved in these communities.
Like, for instance, UFOs. What happens at an event like that?
There are a lot of different ways to hold an event about something like UFOs. Typically have different speakers on the topic, sharing about maybe a sighting that they had or a position that they were in. A really great event that's here in Texas, down in Edinburgh, which is at the southern tip of Texas there, is the Out of This World UFO Festival and Conference. I've been multiple times. It's an annual event. Edinburgh really does a great job of putting together a very prestigious lineup of speakers that really have good credibility, great material, and lots of fun. And so we get together on Friday for a festival, and the Saturday is the conference. Anymore, as well as MUFON investigators. MUFON, of course, is the Mutual UFO Network, a big organization that studies UFO reports.
Now, if you're a serious UFO investigator, what is that lifestyle like?
Well, there's a lot of different dynamics to how to go about investigating a very strange phenomenon like UFOs. It might start with live investigators will actually go out into the field, to the location, see if they can talk to witnesses, and get some kind of report made that they can follow up on and make a determination if maybe it was just some airplane lights or maybe it was something else, something that can be reasonably explained, or if it can't. And if it can't, maybe, not necessarily just jump to conclusions or assumptions of alien spaceships, but at the same time, just finding out that if there's no conventional explanation, there could be other possibilities. And so it's important to keep in mind that UFO doesn't always mean alien spaceship.
Most people who would witness some kind of event like that, the last thing from their mind is making a report, because most people don't understand what they would do with a report if they had one. I mean, past calling your local newspaper or something. What do people do when they want to report a UFO?
Well, there are a lot of different avenues to consider, and you made a good point that a lot of times people might see something or experience what we call a UFO. They may never report it. They may never even think much of it after that incident. But for the reports that we do receive from various agencies like MUFON and the National UFO Reporting Center, and things like this, not all of them imply that they are alien spaceships. We just don't know exactly what they are. Of course, that's specifically what the term stands for, unidentified. And so it could mean unconventional aircraft, something from the military that is not yet public. There are a lot of different other more conventional explanations, and that's important to keep in mind.
You use the term meta-material. You want to explain a little more about what that is?
Sure. So a lot of material has come out more recently about the group that the Pentagon has assembled over the years known as ATIP, and that's the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. This is supposedly an agency within the Pentagon that investigated UFOs and UFO reports. And so this is something that came out at the end of 2017 through various news sources and media outlets as a subtle form, or some would say a subtle form of disclosure from the government. One particularly, Dr. Eric Davis, from what I recall at the University of Texas in Austin, with various studies on wormholes, different energy properties, and what they are now calling metamaterial. Scientists were working on these studies, and the metamaterials were actually housed in Austin and being examined. The consensus is that they were retrieved from various crashes, whether they were terrestrial or not. Some kind of exotic material was obtained, and from that they are describing these metamaterials. And these are something that is, again, it's not a conventional chemical composition. Apparently, they're finding out it might have what would be known as anti-gravitic properties, or in other words, anti-gravity. A lot of very interesting, almost sci-fi type issues, and so we could be dealing with a lot of serious depth, a lot of weight to some of these things that are potentially being studied by the government and military right here in our backyard.
On all of my interviews with so many of the people that are one type or another of cryptozoology investigators, my favorite are the Bigfoot people. Because they're sincere, because clearly they are seeing or communicating or becoming more and more aware of the creatures that are out there. Call it Sasquatch, call it Bigfoot, but I understand there is another Bigfoot meetup or get-together that is going to be taking place soon. Will you tell us about that?
Oh, that's right, Michael. It's going to be a really great event. It's going to be the second time that this event's going to be held. It's known as the Southeast Texas Bigfoot Conference. And that is in Huntsville. It's around the San Houston National Forest. There was an amazing event last year. I'd say over 1,000 people in attendance came out. So a really awesome lineup. This year, I'm sure it's going to be even better. We've got some great speakers coming up. And again, it's like a UFO conference. You have many different people coming forward to share their accounts of whatever encounters or sightings they might have had, or the research they've been doing for many, many years in a variety of areas all over North America and beyond. What's very important about these events is that it allows a supportive network for people to come in and feel comfortable with something that, which otherwise they would probably be laughed off of or ridiculed for sharing something like this. It's very challenging to come forward publicly and say, I saw what we call a Bigfoot.
Well, now, let me say something about that, because I run into that all the time. There is still a large part of the population who, when you bring up Sasquatch or Bigfoot or creatures in the woods of one type or another, just immediately get that look on their face where they're like, yeah. And they just think it is just kind of ridiculous. Yet, like you have, I have stood in rooms of people with hundreds of people in there that don't just believe because they want to believe, but actually believe because they have or are having first-hand experience with the creatures that we call Bigfoot, and they are much more prolific than I think most anyone realizes, except for someone like yourself that studies the phenomena. What are your thoughts on that?
I might say, I don't think it matters if I believe or I don't believe. If you say it's out there, it's going to be out there whether I believe or not. And so I think it's important to keep in mind, like you said, these people feel and know that they've experienced something so fast. And we just try to find ways to cope with that. And most of society doesn't know how. And so we find these communities of, again, these like-minded individuals who are supportive, who encourage the outspokenness of those who have these types of experiences, but in a way also that we find out more about what we could be dealing with. I like to think that we don't know, we won't know if we don't go. And that's something I like to live by.
Well, we won't know if we don't go. That's kind of our philosophy on Free Range Texan. All right, so the Bigfoot Conference, one more time, tell us when and where that is.
Sure thing. So the Southeast Texas Bigfoot Conference is going to be April 12th and April 13th. That's Friday and Saturday. It's going to be a great lineup. You can go to their website, southeasttexasbigfoot.com, and get tickets and things like that. But we've got Lyle Blackthorne, another Texas cryptozoologist. We've got Shelley Covington, Montana. You've got David Weatherly, who also covers an array of unusual topics like the black-eyed pigs phenomenon. And I think some of the other speakers I'm really excited to see again, and I'll just mention them because these are just all-stars. You've got Adam Davis, who has traveled the world looking for the Yeti, looking for dinosaurs, and looking for living fossils, looking for Sasquatch. One of the ones I'm looking forward to seeing again is going to be Bob Gimlin. Left Creek in California in 1967, about 51 years ago. The most iconic film of Bigfoot, the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Everybody's seen that, yes.
Everyone's seen it. Important and well-known features in media history. And we've got the privilege of having Bob Gimlin come out and be an honored guest April 12th and April 13th. Southeast Texas Bigfoot Conference in Huntsville, Texas, and that's going to be around the San Houston National Forest, north of Houston.
Also, but the last thing, and I save this to last because there is a term in the name of this event that kind of sets it apart from the stuff that we have talked about up till now. There is a paranormal and UFO event. And I think it's interesting that they combine the two. Paranormal situations, paranormal stories, paranormal events, and threw in a little UFO for color. Tell us about that meeting and what is that going to be like?
And so the first one was a native scene, and this one that we're going to be having in May, on May 18th and May 19th, is going to be the Skydancer Paranormal and UFO Conference in Houston, Texas. It's going to be a great event, and we're going to have people coming to share with them their perspective on this unusual paranormal phenomenon. And that relates to other issues like UFOs and cryptids or the creatures of cryptozoology.
That's a different tone than anything we've discussed thus far. That, I think, would also be a very interesting expenditure of time to go over and spend a day or two in an event like that. Daniel, it is always a pleasure to have you on our podcast. Thank you for bringing us up to date, sir. We appreciate you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Michael. It's always a pleasure.
You've been listening to another free-range Texan unexplained file. If you would like to get in touch possibly with today's guest, or would like to learn more information about this segment of our free-range Texan unexplained file, then go to our website at freerangetexan.net.
We say, get your snapshots in.
Maybe just a selfie.
How many can be in the picture?
We really don't care.
The Free Range Texan Listener Posse. Is it just for Texans?
Anyone from planet Earth.
Or not.
Okay, how do we send them in?
info@freerangetexan.net.
So we get the picture on the blog.
We'd have it no other way.
And we get the picture on the Free Range Texan Facebook page.
Yep.
And then we're official members of the Free Range Texan Listener Posse.
You want a little sugar with that coffee?
So, you're making us famous.
Yeah.
So I send the picture to info@freerangetexan.net.
And that will get her done.
How about I just bring it by the ranch out yonder?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm busy that day. Well, hello there. This is Michael Shawn. And since you're here, you might as well pull up and sit down here at the campfire with me. Pour yourself a cup. In all honesty, I'm kinda in a Texas state of mind. Well, I guess you noticed by now that we bring up from time to time that place south of the Red River and north of the Rio Grande, known as Texas. It can often be a different kind of place here in Texas. They got some crazy laws that the Brain Trust down in Austin has, at one time or another, put into effect. For instance, did you know that it's still against the law in Texas to carry a pair of wire cutters in your toolbox or your saddlebag or wherever? You see, creating an entrance or an exit to a barbed wire fence was easily granted with such a tool. They tell me parts of the United States border with Mexico are just about the same. Whatever you want to say about the people of the Lone Star State, they're an incredible part of the American fabric. But all that unrivaled freedom, combined with a famously pastoral outlook, has given rise to some pretty strange laws. There's a rule that outlaws the Encyclopedia Britannica. Not for the reasons that you're thinking. People in Texas do like to read from time to time. The reason is due to the Texas government's apparently fervent belief that making beer at home is a bad thing. Since the Britannica contained a recipe for brewing beer, the state's elders deemed the entire book illegal. And never a state to condone frivolous dalliances, Texas once had a rule installed that made it possible to be legally married if you were introduced publicly as husband and wife 3 or more times. Then there's the beach town of Galveston, Texas. It's 100% legal to get completely drunk in a city park, provided that you get permission from the director of Parks and Recreation before you start tossing them back. And furthermore, there's actually a law on the books that says no obnoxious odors are to be admitted while inside an elevator. That can be pretty hard to achieve after some Tex-Mex. One city ordinance in Texas mandated that citizens were only able to walk barefoot in public if they purchased a special $5 permit. And it only seemed reasonable that the government should install professional foot smellers to dictate the rules of decency. All right.
right? And then there is the locomotive paradox. Picture, if you will, the law reads as such. When two trains meet each other at a railroad crossing, each shall come to a full stop, and neither shall proceed until the other has gone. Lone Star State politicians never cease to amaze me. It was Lyndon Johnson who said, "Generally, Texas towns are too small to support one lawyer, but none are too small to support two lawyers." I'm Michael Shawn, and I just mentioned politicians and lawyers in one Campfire program. I'll clean this up for the next visit. Adios, my friends. Y'all tip that guitar player, will you? There it is again. Do a little break dancing there. Ooh, busting a move there. No extra charge for the mental image, folks. Free Range Texan podcast. Whew, is this fun or what? Hey, thanks to the folks that make it all work. Thanks for Daniel Jones for dropping in on this podcast. Also, we appreciate all the folks that put together the big dog fight before that. Oh, yeah. And thank you most of all to those people that make it happen, those folks at A-Team PR. The PR in A-Team PR stands for Public Relations. If you're looking for audio, video, radio, television, broadcast of any type, strategic media planning, or image counseling, maybe you could hire the A-Team. If you'd like more information about A-Team PR, you can go to freerangetexan.net. Of course, right there on the main splash page, there's a link to A-Team PR's website. You tell them Michael sent you there, will you? Well, that wraps up another good one. Glad you joined us. In 2 weeks, we'll be back. You can listen to this as many times as you want, you know. Tell a friend. Numbers are growing here on the Free Range Texan podcast, and we have no one but you to thank for that. Good dog, Foxy. Foxy, the wonder dog there. Go get in the pickup. Well, take them to the barn, folks, and thank you, everybody, and especially you, Sweetie Pie. Take them home.
Thank y'all for listening to the Free Range Texan podcast, produced at A-Team PR Studios out yonder in West Texas, with our host, who's been voted the hardest working man in podcasting, Michael Shawn. Feedback or submissions to our program can be submitted on our website, freerangetexan.net. That's freerangetexan.net. This is Sweetie Pie on behalf of Michael, Shawn, and the crew here in Studio A, where we're all looking forward to spending time with you on our next bi-weekly episode of the Free Range Texan podcast. Y'all come back now, you hear?
Tower, this is Free Range Texan Airways, Podcast 1, ready for takeoff.
Podcast 1, you're cleared for takeoff.
Nose up. Check wheels up.
Wheels up.
Reduce flaps. Mr. Sanders, take us to 10,000 feet. Bring us around to a course of south by southwest.
10,000 feet, south by southwest. Aye, Captain.
Engage autopilot.